Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Hope that you are all doing well and staying safe. Here is Mariam Shreif, a senior petroleum engineering student at the Lebanese American University. I would like to welcome you all to today's last lecture with Dr. Hatem Farouk Ewida, which will be about the applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning in geoscience. Dr. Ewida has worked extensively in the oil and gas industry in both technical and managerial positions with local and international companies, such as Gulf of Suez Petroleum Company, British Petroleum, and currently with Perenco North Sinai Petroleum Company, where he is the Exploration General Manager and board member of its joint venture. Dr. Ewida received his Bachelor in Science, Diploma, Master's degree, and PhD degree in Geology, Petroleum Geology, and Geophysics. In addition, he has taught industry-tailored and university courses, as well as published and reviewed several research papers with local and international journals. In addition, he supervised many PhD and master's programs. Finally, Dr. Ewida is a board member of the Egyptian Geophysical Society and an active member of the SEG. So please help me in welcoming Dr. Ewida. So welcome, Doctor, and thank you for your contribution and the time you dedicated to delivering a series of lectures as a part of PIOPETRA's summer internship. We highly appreciate your effort, and we are looking forward to having you in future events and webinars. And on a final note, please keep your questions that are related to the technical content of this lecture in the Q&A section. Now, without any further ado, Dr. Ewida, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Mariam. So, hello, everybody. I'm glad to be with you today for my 8th lecture, which is the end of a series of lectures covering the seismic method exploration or seismic method for hydrocarbon exploration. Today, we will cover an interesting subject, which is artificial intelligence and machine learning for geosciences application. As usual, we start with the contents of our lecture today. So we'll start with identifying the artificial intelligence and machine learning. This will be followed by a summary of the history of the machine learning. Then what is artificial neural network? We'll identify different types of artificial neural networks and how does artificial neural network work. Then we'll understand or give some details about the supervised and unsupervised training or learning for the neural networks. And then we'll give an idea about the deep learning and convolutional neural network, the CNN. This will be followed by real data examples. So at the beginning, I'd like to identify to you the artificial intelligence and machine learning from understanding the difference between both of them. So starting with artificial intelligence, actually artificial intelligence is a technology which enables a machine to simulate human behavior. And it uses several tools. So it starts from the neural networks, it uses deep learning, natural language processing, conjunctive computing, computer vision, and machine learning. So from this, we understand that machine learning is a subset of the artificial intelligence, which allow the machine to automatically learn from past data programming without programming explicit. So the goal of the artificial intelligence, again, is to make a smart computer system that work like human or to solve complex problems. So generally speaking, you can summarize that artificial intelligence applies machine learning, deep learning, and other techniques to solve actual problems. And this is in general, but when we talk about problems, we mean the interpretation of the subsurface data for the sake of hydrocarbon exploration. So the history of the machine learning really starts, it's not recent, it started actually before 1950, and it keep developing and progressing with what I mean, the progression in the computers and the addition of the scientists on this type of science. So actually, it started, or the first case of neural networks was in 1943 when a neurophysiologist called Warren McCulloch and a mathematician called Walter Pitts, they wrote a paper about the neurons, and the neurons, we will understand more about neurons now, which is the cells of the human brain. They wrote about the neurons and how they work, and they decided to create a model of these neurons using electrical circuit, and therefore the neural networks was born. So it is since 1943 actually. And again, the artificial intelligence, as we just mentioned, is any technique. It is any technique which enables computers to mimic human behavior. So it will work or do like human do. And it uses like machine learning. And again, the machine learning are all techniques that give computers the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed to do so. So without programming, you train the computer to think or to apply something, as we will see in details. And there is another tool, which is the deep learning, and the deep learning is a subset of machine learning, which make the computation of multi-layer neural networks visible. So what is artificial neural network? As we mentioned, so the term artificial neural network is derived from biological neural networks that develop the structure of a human brain. And the biological neural network, it is built up of a cell nucleus, and then there is what's called a dendrite, and we'll understand the action of each of these terminologies now. And then it has the axon and the synapse. Similar to the human brain that has the neurons interconnected to one another, the artificial neural networks also have neurons, but that are interconnected to one another in various layers of the networks. These neurons are called nodes. So it is nodes. So the nodes are similar to the neurons of, or like what I mean, scientists try to do nodes that look similar, like the human brain cells or the human neurons. So in general, the artificial neural network, we will have the neuron or the neuron on the middle, and you will have different inputs, and you have the nodes, and then you will have an output. This is generally architecture. We will talk about more about architecture now. So to understand more the nomenclatures or the parts of the neural network compared to the biological or the human neural network. The biological neural network, the dendrites are corresponding to the inputs in the artificial neural network. The cell nucleus is the same as the nodes, or it is copied as the nodes in the artificial neural networks. The synapse is like the weight in the artificial neural network, and the axon is corresponding to the axon of the biological neural network is corresponding to the output of the artificial neural networks. So it is composed of the same number of constituents of the biological neural network. So what is the main architecture of an artificial neural network? To see this in details. So the artificial neural network, as you see in this plot, it is primarily consists of three layers: the input layer, the hidden layer, and the output layer. The input layer, from its name, it accepts input in several and different formats provided by the programmer. And the hidden layer represents in between input and the output layer, and it performs all the calculations to find hidden feature and pattern. The output layer, the input goes through a series of transformation using the hidden layer, which finally results in output that is conveyed using this layer. And as you notice, you can have more than one hidden layer. So it's not only one layer, you can have more than that. So going further to know how does the artificial networks work, actually the artificial networks, artificial neural network can be represented as a weighted, directed weights, or where what I mean, you have the artificial neurons form the nodes of it. The association between the neurons output and the neuron inputs can be viewed as the directed edges with weight. So if you take a look on this plot here, so you will have the input and the hidden layer, and then the output, which is the main architecture of the neural network. Also, there are different types of artificial neural network. So I forget the word artificial, but we are talking about the artificial neural network because the neural network is the human brain cells. So there are different types actually, and I will concentrate on the types that helps on the geosciences application. So types of artificial neural network, we have a feedback artificial neural network, and in these types artificial neural network, the output returns into the network to accomplish the best evolved results internally. While the other type, which is called the feed-forward artificial neural network, the primary advantage of this network is that it figures out how to evaluate and recognize input patterns. So there are many differences. All of these, what I mean, introductions and identification of the networks, we will see how we use this in a practical application near the end of our session. So let's go further and see how the neural network works. So neural networks are designed to work just like the human brain does, as we mentioned several times. The process of learning and basic mechanics in an artificial neural network is similar to the human brain, and the computational neural networks exist purely as software on a computer. So it is programs. Okay, a computational neural network is a mathematical algorithm which encodes a relationship either in single dataset itself or among datasets, different datasets. The strength of a neural network is the ability to determine a nonlinear relationship, and this is the key actually for the geosciences application. So the strength of a neural network, of an artificial neural network, again, is the ability to determine a nonlinear relationship between seismic properties or seismic trace, for example, and well log property. The importance of this is that we call the well logs are as hard data. because well logs are recorded in a drilled holes and in a direct contact with the geological formations. So it has hard geological information. So once I have wells, I have a well and I can splice this well on the seismic data. So this well will be at the same place of a trace or couple of traces if it is a deviated well. And then I can find out a relation between the geology and the reflectivity in the seismic. And this relationship, actually, the artificial neural network could find out a nonlinear relation. And from this, I can extract, as you will see, as we will mention now, two main types of applications. The two main types of applications in this case depends on the type of neural network that I use. So I can extract, for example, the Facies classification and the Facies distribution using a type of neural networks called the unsupervised neural network. Or I can predict the reservoir properties using the supervised neural network. So we will see that in the next slide. But before to go to the next slide, what I show you here in these plots is to remind you with the neural or the biological neural network, and when the scientists start to build the artificial or the artificial brain or something like that, they use millions or billions or even several billions of transistors to have a partial function of the human brain can apply or can do. So let's see the supervised and understand what are the difference between the supervised and unsupervised learning or training to the algorithms, to the the artificial neural network algorithms. So starting with the supervised learning model, and in this model, the algorithm learns on a labeled dataset. Labeled dataset means that I identify to the algorithm the type of this dataset or the name of this dataset. This provides an answer key that the algorithm can use to evaluate its accuracy on a training data. So I start with training the algorithm using a labeled dataset. And in this case, I know what the output I want. So I know that they are the output. For example, to understand how this supervised learning happened is the recognition of a particular letter, like the letter A, P, or C, that can be carried out with a guidance of a teacher. So the teacher teach to the student that this shape called letter A. Okay, so now this is the supervised learning. There is someone supervise the student to understand or to learn that this letter is called A, B, or C. And it uses sort of applications like the regression and classification to differentiate between those properties. Okay, when we go to the unsupervised model, in contrast, it provides unlabeled data. So I give data to the algorithms and leave the algorithms by itself recognize what is there. So it provides unlabeled data that the algorithm tries to make sense of by extracting features and patterns on its own. And in this situation, the output, the desired output does not known or it can be determined. So, but to give an example, like the learning letter supervised by the teacher, this is learning a particular letter, for example, by correcting the mistakes several times. So you learn yourself by correcting the mistake several times. And the application is what I mean is done by using what's called the clustering and the association. So let's have a practical example to more understand this. It's like for the supervised one, I'll give you the example of the prediction of sand diffraction, the lithology and porosity and whatever. So you started with an amplitude section, seismic section. So this is in your left-hand side is a vertical seismic section, and the colors there are for the amplitude on this one. And you use the supervised artificial neural network, okay, to output or to predict the sand distribution or fraction, sand percentage, what I mean, and on this inline, and it will have a different color. Okay, so you find the relationship between your seismic data and log data, and then you output the sand diffraction, for example. For the unsupervised artificial neural network, if you start, what I mean, with these particles with different colors, the algorithm itself will cluster or group these particles according to their color, as you see. So these are the difference between the supervised and the unsupervised neural networks. We'll see more practical examples. So we'll see examples from the supervised neural network application, and the applications that I'm going to show you is using an automatic normal without correction. And you remember the normal without correction from the processing lectures. The normal without correction is an important correction. And in this study, the authors try to use this automatically. They train the computer or the algorithm, the artificial neural network, to apply the normal without correction, and we'll see the results. So they optimize the data, and they convert the data, the CMB data, from the TX domain to the tau B domain, and then start to calculate the velocity. And they use in that the velocity model using a velocity log. So the velocity log now, this is what trains the data to distribute the velocity across the seismic line. And then they apply the normal without correction in the tau B domain, and they start to analyze the error and have graphs for the validation and calculate the errors that they have. And if the error is more than the expected error or the desired error, then they will return back to this step, and finally they got out the final weights, and then they apply to the first series is training, and then they have the prediction. Prediction means that will apply this output or the final weights on all the seismic data, and they end up with the seismic with the velocity section that you see on your right-hand side at the bottom of the slide. And this is the final velocity model from the NMO corrected 100 CMP using this trained fast feed forward, if in any means feed forward neural network in the tau B domain. So you train the computer to do what you can do yourself. Okay, you can do all of this yourself. Okay, but you take time to save time, and if you apply this on a huge volume of data, you train the computer, and it will do it for you. So we'll see another type of supervised neural networks and another application. So this type will use it for predicting the reservoir properties from the combination of various sample-based seismic attributes. So I will use the seismic attributes to help me in this case. So seismic attributes includes acoustic impedance, and I can use well data actually to help me in this. The most common use of the artificial neural network scheme in reservoir characterization are type of artificial neural networks that called the multi-layer feed-forward neural network, and this is similar to the traditional pike progression in geostatistics. And another type of neural network, which is called the probabilistic neural network, the PNN, and we'll see application of this right now. And this is equivalent to something in geostatistics called gradient. So I give you the names just to be familiar with the name of the neural networks, but you understand now how we use this in a practical application, and I will summarize that at the end of my presentation. So using the probabilistic artificial neural network, the PNN will start with the input, and the input is the seismic, because this is what I'm talking about. So all of the applications that I'm talking about in the eight lectures are based on using the seismic data. So I start with the seismic volume, as you see, seismic stack volume, that I can also invert it into a P impedance volume, and start to extract some attributes from these volumes. The attributes here is to tie between the seismic reflectivity, which is in the first case with the seismic volume, it has peaks and troughs and reflectors and so on, and in the B impedance you have the acoustic impedance logs, which is a velocity by density, and this is what we will reach at the end. Then I will use well data, if I have well data, because we called it the hard data, as I mentioned before, and then I train my computer and validate the output. So I keep training my computer until I validate what I mean, the output of the training, that it is as expected theoretically. This is in the validation, or to tie it or quality control it at the position of the wells in intersection with the seismic data, or in tie with the seismic data. After that, I will reach to the output, and in this case, the output is the water saturation volume, the same cube, same size of the seismic data, but now it is, instead of peaks and troughs and reflectors, it is a water saturation or effective porosity in this case. So I can output V shale, I can output hydrocarbon exploration, I can output permeability, whatever. So I invert the seismic data, which is again traces with peaks and troughs and reflectors, and I can invert it into any reservoir parameters using the supervised neural network. So this will help me to cover a huge area in almost no time, comparing to the human efforts and time. So let's this is what we see volumes now. So we can take closer look. So I can even have like vertical sections. In this section for the water saturation distribution, and this is for the effective porosity distribution. And you see the color bars, and you see how you can see the distribution of the reservoir properties or the astrophysical parameters across your whole seismic data or across certain sections. And this is we applied here a supervised artificial neural network in this situation. So let's go and see some examples for the unsupervised neural networks. So in this example, we will see an application which mainly uses the unsupervised. If you remember 2-3 slides ago, which is the seismic facies analysis. We use the unsupervised machine learning artificial neural network for seismic facies analysis. So we will start as usual by seismic. So we'll have the input is the seismic data, and what you see here from the seismic data, we see the vertical. We see 2 vertical sections intersected at the middle, and we have a horizontal slice. So starting from seismic data, then we train the algorithm of the computer, and we generate some memory cell generation. Then we have number of clusters. This is unsupervised, and we extract useful data from the input cube using this memory cell. This is followed by generating self-organized maps, and these self-organized maps we'll see how it works to distribute our Facies in the day. Then we cluster, or the algorithm will cluster these self-organized maps, and then we'll have the Facies map and the output. So this is the Facies map, and how this is a map. This is a map that covers the whole area. So you start with seismic data, which is again reflections, peaks and troughs and reflectors, and then you end up using the unsupervised artificial neural network, and you get a phase change on the map view. So you can now interpret that these are the splays and these are the channels, and we have some faults here. Okay. Going further and see more examples for the unsupervised neural network. So we start again with seismic, as usual with seismic, and these red colors represents the reservoir zone with this seismic data, and in this example we'll see the Facies analysis. So in each slide you will have the link to the original research that I get this slide from it, or get these plots from it. You can go and read it exclusively and understand more and more. So we start by petrophysics. So we run, those authors run the formation evaluation using the logs. This is followed by the geology, and they run core and Facies analysis. They apply the sequence stratigraphic techniques, and they built logs for the Facies analysis. After that, use the geophysics, like extracting some seismic attributes and doing data reduction, this clustering, because this is unsupervised. So they generate self-organized maps. They do calibration with the geology, and then they extracted geopodies. Geopody means that I extract the reservoir in 3-dimensional, as I separate the reservoir rock from all the surrounding rock and see it in 3 dimensions. This is what we call the geopody, geological body. And the body here means the reservoir. So you can see now your reservoir alone, separately, in 3 dimensions and in different directions. So again, the unsupervised neural network now, it applied what you can apply as a geoscientist or researcher, but this is actually in no time comparing to the effort that exerted by the human brain. Again, you can see this Facies distribution on vertical sections as you see. So on seismic data itself, you can splice or superimpose your interpretation or the Facies that you output from your application of unsupervised neural network. Again, at the bottom of the slide, you will find the link to that. So this is another type, which is called the deep learning and convolutional neural networks, or the CNN. We mentioned that at the beginning. We have different types of neural network, and in the deep learning, actually, because now we have a massive amount of computation, we have like giant computers or computer powers, and we can, what I mean, if you use the social media or whatever, you will find some applications that translate the speech in real time. Okay, so this application reaches this advantage or advances. So the CNN or the convolutional neural network are simply neural networks that use convolution in place of general matrix multiplication. And this is the architecture of this neural network. And it is built up of 4 main operations, actually: the convolution, the nonlinearity, and pooling or subsampling, and then the classification. So this is just to understand what is the architecture of the convolutional neural network, the CNN. So let's see applications of this neural network that use a deep application. So we will see how we generate seismic inversion very easily using this convolutional neural network. So if we want to apply seismic inversion, so we should have seismic at the beginning. So we design the seismic acquisition, and then we acquire the data and we gain the seismic data. Then we apply the inversion. This is generally or the flow for the inversion. And you know, inverting the seismic data or inverting the seismic data, when we talk in the lecture of the advanced seismic techniques, we have pre-stack inversion, we have post-stack inversion, and the inversion is to convert these seismic traces into logs, like density log or velocity log or whatever. So we can use that by ourselves. Geoscientists can do that, what I mean, and there are lots of software. But you can do that again using the machine. You just learn the machine how to do what you did or what you usually do, and it will run that for you and in no time. But you have to supervise that, actually. So you train the neural network, for example. You start with the seismic trace and you apply some processing to denoise the seismic data. Then after that, you apply the convolutional neural network on this denoised seismic data to generate the reflectivity series. And the reflectivity series is the reflection coefficient. You remember that from the previous lectures. So after that, we convert this reflection coefficient back into, yes, the acoustic impedance. So using the Zopret's equation when we talk about the reservoir characterization. So we end up with now the acoustic impedance. So each single seismic trace that is, if you take a look on it, it will be peaks and the troughs that represent reflectors, seismic reflectors. You can invert that into acoustic impedance, and acoustic impedance, as you know, is density by velocity. And you can do this as a human being, as a geoscientist, and you can train your computer to do it for you in very short time and very high accuracy. So let's see more how we use this artificial neural network in, for example, seismic interpretation. So if you take a look on this vertical section of seismic data, you can see that you have a lot of terminations, and these terminations is interpreted as false. Okay, you can learn your network or your neural network using the deep learning technique to understand that this lineament are false. So it will draw this false for you at the location you train it for, and extend that to another locations, actually, because it will scan through the whole data set and start to put the same criteria because you train it on that. And finally, you will end up with the geological model for the subsurface on the seismic data. You will see the faults across the whole area, even if the faults are intersected and whatever. So in this case, you again teach or learn or train the machine to do what you routinely do, but with more accuracy and with more details and in shorter time. Furthermore, with the interpretation, you can use, for example, with the faults, you can use also attributes. We can use attributes. So we can use some attributes, extract some attributes from the seismic data. As you see, for example, here, we have the vertical seismic section, and we have an attribute called the this is called the fault likelihood attribute, and we superimposed both of them on this case. So let me show you. This is a normal seismic section, and it's coming from a 3D volume. This is the architecture of the convolution neural network. And again, so this is a vertical section. You can extract this likelihood attribute, fault likelihood attribute, and superimpose it on your seismic data. So now you know where are your faults. You see different directions of the faults here. Okay, you can use another attribute, for example, what's called the maximum curvature attribute, for example, and you learn the algorithm or the computer that extracting these attributes, you can use it because what you see, the yellow and bright blue color here means that this is a fault and this is a graben, and this lineament means that this is a fault plane or so on, and it will run across the whole volume and start to generate or to interpret it for you, to output the all faults in this situation. So generally, in summary, to summarize the examples that I gave you is we start with seismic data as usual, and this is what we mentioned in every and each example. So we start with seismic data, and seismic data is seismic section, and here is the traces of the seismic section. Here is the peaks, there is the troughs, and so this is called a reflector, and so on. This is your horizon interpretation in blue, and you have some wells. So you have seismic, you have wells in red here, and you have horizons, which mean it's your interpretation. And then you run seismic inversion on this, and you end up with pseudo logs like the acoustic impedance, the shear impedance, or the density, so which is acoustic impedance that we mentioned several times, and supporting that with some hard data like the well logs, the core data, in which you measure porosity, saturation, and Facies, plus any other seismic attributes as we just mentioned, and you use the artificial neural network to apply for you some of the techniques like the rock physics model, the geostatistics, or any simple statistics, and you use all of these mathematician and in algorithms, either what I mean supervised or unsupervised, and you end up with, if you use the supervised neural network, you will end up with the reservoir properties like the porosity, saturation, shale volume. And if you use the unsupervised neural artificial neural networks, whatever it was, deep learning or convolutional or probabilistic or whatever, you will have the Facies distribution or what we call the probability maps in the area. So you choose the best algorithm you have and train your algorithms as a supervised learning, or use the unsupervised learning. And by the end, you start, when you start with seismic data, you end up with petrophysical and reservoir properties volume equal to the seismic volume. With this slide, I conclude my presentation to you today, and I will be happy to answer your questions, if any. Thank you.
Now we actually have some questions for you. The first question is that, do you recommend any book or a reference for the applications of AI in geoscience?
I think there are a lot of published papers, and the published paper will be more practical. So if you search in the SCG library or the AAPG or the SPE library, you'll find some published papers that have very good applications. In this lecture, what I mentioned the link for some of these papers that you can learn from it, what I mean, the methodology itself, and you can see the applications on the data itself. What I mean, practical application.
Okay, thank you. Another question is that what graduate degree do you recommend to pursue to become an AI or machine learning expert in the petroleum industry?
I think this is nowadays is what's called the fourth revolution, the fourth industry revolution, and the fourth industry revolution actually it's all about or built on artificial intelligence and machine learning. It is what I mean, very valuable, but actually dangerous, because you will use the machine more than human themselves. So each one has to learn actually the machine learning. So you have to find a place for yourself in the very near future. So you have to know how to apply the machine learning, how to train the machine, how to use the programs for this, because again, this is the fourth industrial revolution, and it is all about the machine learning and artificial intelligence.
I think we don't have any questions anymore. So thank you again, Doctor, for your time and effort in delivering these series of lectures. We are a pleasure to have you in our future events and webinars. Now, I hope that you all enjoyed the session today. And please don't forget to check your Google Classroom for the deadlines of the posted assignments and exams. Now, thank you again, Doctor. And that's all for today. Stay safe and have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you.